The fluorescent lights of the courtroom hummed, a dull counterpoint to the frantic rhythm of my heart. My hands, clasped tightly in my lap, were slick with sweat. I could feel the weight of 100 gazers. Some curious, some sympathetic, some outright judgmental, pressing against me like a physical force. Ms. Miller, Judge Thompson's voice, calm and even, cut through the tense silence. Are you ready to proceed? I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. Yes, Your Honor. My voice wavered slightly, but I held my head high, determined to maintain composure. This was it, the culmination of months of agonizing deliberation, sleepless nights, and painful confrontations. The day I finally stood up for myself. Ms. Miller, the judge continued, his gaze steady on me. You've brought a rather unusual case before this court. You are suing your parents for emotional distress. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. The words felt strange on my tongue, almost alien. Suing my parents. It was a concept that had been unthinkable just a few months ago. And the basis of this claim. Judge Thompson leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Is it related to the incident at your wedding? The courtroom buzzed with hushed whispers. The incident. That's what everyone called it now. The ultimate betrayal on the happiest day of one's life. The day my parents chose a business deal over walking me down the aisle. Yes, Your Honor, I repeated, my voice gaining strength. My parents missed my wedding for a business deal. My lawyer, Ms. Caldwell, a sharp woman with a steel-trap mind and a reassuringly firm handshake, placed a comforting hand on my arm. Your Honor, if I may. She interjected smoothly. We believe Miss Miller's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Miller, have exhibited a long-standing pattern of neglect and emotional disregard, culminating in the devastating incident at her wedding. Judge Thompson nodded. Proceed, Miss Caldwell. Thank you, Your Honor, Ms. Caldwell said, turning to me. Grace, can you tell the court about your relationship with your parents growing up? I took a deep breath, the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. My parents, they were always busy. Their careers were everything. My voice cracked. I understand that building a successful business requires dedication. But I paused, searching for the right words. There's a difference between dedication and absence. Can you give us some specific examples, Grace? Ms. Caldwell prompted gently. I hesitated. Reliving these memories was like picking at old wounds, each one raw and throbbing. When I was 10, I had my first lead role in the school play. I played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I'd practiced for months, and I was so excited for them to see me. My voice trembled. They promised they'd be there. They even bought front row tickets. I looked down at my hands, the memory still vivid. The bright stage lights, the nervous excitement bubbling in my chest, the expectant faces of the audience, and the 2 empty seats in the front row, staring back at me like accusing eyes. They didn't show up, I said quietly, my voice choked with emotion. Their flight was delayed because of a last-minute business meeting. They sent flowers the next day, a bouquet of red roses and a note saying, sorry, you missed it, sweetie. It became a pattern. My gaze swept across the courtroom, taking in the faces of the jury. Birthdays, graduations, recitals, they were always elsewhere. And what about your wedding, Grace? Miss Caldwell asked, a voice soft but firm. I closed my eyes, a memory of that day washing over me in a wave of pain and anger. The beautiful dress, the nervous excitement, the anticipation of finally starting my life with Julian, and then the devastating phone call. My parents wouldn't be there. A business deal in Japan had come up, an opportunity they couldn't pass up. A bride's dream wedding turns into a nightmare. I whispered, the words barely audible. They said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I continued, my voice growing stronger. They said they'd make it up to me. A bigger, better honeymoon. A house down the street from them. Anything I wanted. I laughed. A harsh, brittle sound. As if material possessions could ever replace their presence on the most important day of my life. Did they attempt to contact you on the day of your wedding? Ms. Caldwell asked. They sent a text message. My voice dripped with sarcasm. Thinking of you, sweetie. So sorry we missed your big day. Love. Mom and Dad. I looked directly at Judge Thompson. My gaze unwavering. Parents missed their daughter's wedding for a business deal. That's my story, Your Honor. That's why I'm here. The courtroom was silent. The weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. I took another deep breath, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within me. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step towards healing, towards finally getting the acknowledgement and validation I had craved for so long. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about a lifetime of missed moments, of empty promises, of feeling like I was never quite enough. It was about learning to stand up for myself, about finally putting my own needs first. And I wasn't backing down. The courtroom air hung thick and heavy, each breath a struggle. My parents, Richard and Deborah Miller, sat across from me, their faces etched with a practiced indifference that made my stomach churn. A bride's dream wedding turns into a nightmare, the lawyer had said, and how true those words were. This lawsuit, this whole mess, was about more than just the missing my wedding for a business deal. It was about a lifetime of slights, of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. Ms. Miller, can you recall a specific instance where your parents demonstrated preferential treatment towards your brother, Ethan? My lawyer's voice, calm and steady, pulled me back to the present. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. There are many, but one stands out. My lawyer nodded, encouraging me to continue. I closed my eyes. The image of that day burned into my memory. It was Ethan's 16th birthday, a lavish affair, as always. My parents had rented out the entire top floor of the swankiest restaurant in town. The kind with panoramic city views and waiters who anticipated your every need. The decorations were extravagant, balloons in Ethan's favorite sports team colors, a giant ice sculpture in the shape of a basketball player, a live band playing his favorite pop songs. It was a spectacle, I said, my voice tight with unched tears. Ethan loved basketball, so naturally, the entire party was themed around it. There were personalized jerseys for all the guests, signed basketballs as party favors. Even a former NBA player made a surprise appearance. My lawyer raised an eyebrow. And what did you receive for your 16th birthday, Ms. Miller? I opened my eyes, meeting her gaze. A sweater. A hand-knitted sweater from my grandmother. It was practical. The word felt like acid on my tongue. My parents claimed they couldn't afford a big party for me. Said Ethan deserved something special because he was a gifted athlete with a bright future. I made air quotes with my fingers. The bitterness palpable. Did they express these sentiments to you directly, Ms. Miller? My lawyer leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. I nodded, remembering the conversation as if it were yesterday. We were in the kitchen, the remnants of Ethan's extravagant birthday cake still scattered across the counter. I had just unwrapped the sweater, trying to force a smile for my grandmother's sake. Mom, Dad, I had started, my voice trembling slightly. Why couldn't I have a party like Ethan's? My mother sighed, her face etched with impatience. Grace, you know we can't afford the big parties in 1 year, she said, not even bothering to look at me. Besides, Ethan deserves it. He's a star athlete. He has a real future. My father chimed in, his voice booming across the room. Your brother has potential, Grace. You need to focus on your studies, not frivolous parties. A word stung, a familiar ache blossoming in my chest. But it's my 16th birthday too, I whispered, clutching the sweater tightly. It's important, my father scoffed. Important? What's so important about turning 16? It's not like you're going to be drafted into the NBA. He winked at Ethan, who smirked and high-fived him. My grandmother patted my hand awkwardly. It's a lovely sweater, dear, she murmured. Hand-knitted with love. I looked down at the sweater. The itchy was scratching against my skin. Love. Was that what it was? Or was it just another reminder of how little I mattered compared to Ethan? My lawyer's voice broke through the swirling memories. Did you express your disappointment to your parents, Ms. Miller? I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. I did, I said, my voice choked with emotion, but they dismissed it. They said I was being ungrateful, that I should be happy with what I had. I remember running to my room, the sweater clutched in my hands. I threw myself onto the bed, tears streaming down my face. I wasn't ungrateful. I just wanted to feel seen. Wanted to feel like my birthday, my life, mattered as much as Ethan's. The injustice of it all burned deep within me, a festering wound that never truly healed. Even now, years later, the memory of that day brought a fresh wave of pain and resentment. My lawyer placed a comforting hand on my arm. Thank you, Ms. Miller. That's very helpful. She turned to the jury, her voice ringing with conviction. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just one example of the deep-seated favoritism that Ms. Miller endured throughout her childhood, a pattern of neglect and emotional manipulation that culminated in the ultimate betrayal, the abandonment of their daughter on her wedding day. I looked at my parents, their faces impassive. They were masters of disguise, experts at presenting a picture-perfect family to the outside world. But I knew the truth. I knew the years of subtle jabs, the constant comparisons to Ethan, the feeling of being perpetually overlooked and undervalued. And now, I was finally ready to expose them for who they really were. They missed my wedding, I whispered, my voice barely audible, for a business deal. A business deal that ultimately fell through. By the way, my lawyer squeezed my arm gently. We'll get to that later, Ms. Miller. She turned back to the jury. This case is about more than just a missed wedding. It's about a daughter who was denied the love and support she deserved. It's about a family torn apart by years of favoritism and neglect. And it's about holding those responsible accountable for their actions. The weight of her words hung in the air, heavy and pregnant with unspoken truths. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I would finally get the justice I deserved. The courtroom air hung thick and heavy, the silence punctuated only by the rhythmic tapping of my lawyer's pen against her legal pad. My parents, seated across from me, avoided my gaze. Their faces, usually so animated and self-assured, were now pale and drawn. I wondered if they were finally starting to understand the magnitude of their betrayal. Grace, my lawyer, Ms. Sharma, whispered, "Are you ready?" I nodded, my throat tight. I'm ready. The ultimate betrayal on the happiest day of one's life. That's what it had been, my wedding day. And they weren't there. My mind drifted back. Not to the wedding itself, but to an earlier time. Another instance of their callous disregard for my feelings. This wasn't just about the wedding. It was about a pattern, a lifetime of being sidelined. This memory, this specific instance of humiliation, claws at me even now. It was senior year of high school, the culmination of years of hard work, late nights hunched over textbooks, and the constant, gnawing pressure to succeed. Graduation. I had dreamt of this day for years, pictured my parents beaming with pride as I walked across the stage, their faces shining brighter than any of the camera flashes. "You're going to do great, honey," Mum said that morning, a fleeting smile gracing her lips. It was a rare moment of connection, and I clung to it, letting the warmth of her words fill me with a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. Maybe this time they would truly be there for me. Not just physically, but emotionally. Dad called, he'll be a little late. Big meeting, she added, the smile already fading. My stomach clenched. But he'll be there, right? I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Of course, sweetie, she said, her voice a little too bright, a little too quick. He wouldn't miss it for the world. Now go get ready. You don't want to be late. I wanted to believe her. I really did. So I pushed down the nagging doubt, the familiar sting of disappointment, and focused on getting ready. I chose my outfit carefully, a simple, elegant dress that I hoped would make them proud. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I imagined their faces, their smiles, their applause. This was my moment. The graduation ceremony was held in the school's football stadium, the stands packed with families and friends. I scanned the crowd, searching for my parents. Mom was there, waving excitedly, but Dad's seat was empty. My heart sank. The familiar wave of disappointment washed over me, leaving me feeling cold and hollow. Throughout the ceremony, I kept glancing at his empty seat, each glance a fresh stab of pain. Each name called, each graduate cheered, only amplified the emptiness I felt. My name was finally called. Grace Miller. I walked across the stage, my legs feeling heavy, my smile forced. I accepted my diploma, my hand trembling as I shook the principal's hand. As the applause thundered around me, I felt utterly alone. The ceremony ended. People streamed onto the field, congratulating each other, hugging their families. I walked over to Mom, a forced smile plastered on my face. Congratulations, honey, she said, hugging me tightly. We're so proud of you. Where's Dad? I asked, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. Her smile faltered. He got held up at the office, she said, her voice strained. Something important came up, more important than my graduation. I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Don't be silly, Grace, she said, her tone sharper now. You know how important his work is. But he promised. I mumbled, feeling the tears welling up in my eyes. He had to reschedule. This deal is going to land his team a huge promotion, she explained, her voice rising in frustration. She continued. He didn't have any other choice. Stop making a fuss. Looking around, I saw other families celebrating, their joy radiating outwards. I felt the pang of envy, a deep ache in my chest. Why couldn't my family be like that? Why was their work, their deals, always more important than me? He said he'd be here, I repeated, my voice thick with unshed tears. He promised, Mum sighed, her face edged with impatience. Grace, please, don't make a scene. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal, I asked, my voice rising. It is to me. It's my graduation. Grace, enough. Mum hissed, glancing around self-consciously. Everyone staring, and in that moment, I knew. It wasn't just that Dad had missed my graduation. It was that Mum didn't understand. Didn't even try to understand how much it hurt. It was the dismissal, the minimizing of my feelings, the expectation that I should just accept their constant prioritization of work over family. Later that evening, Dad called. Sorry I missed it, kiddo, he said, his voice sounding tired. Big deal came through. Couldn't be helped. He went on to describe the details of the business deal, the negotiations, the profits. I listened silently, the phone pressed tightly against my ear, my heart aching with a familiar emptiness. He didn't ask about my graduation, about how I felt, about anything other than the deal. "We'll celebrate this weekend," he finally said, his voice brightening. "Dinner at the grill. Your favorite." "Okay," I replied dully, knowing that even their celebration would likely be overshadowed by another important business call, another missed connection. That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching my graduation diploma. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of all the hard work I had put in, all the sacrifices I had made, and it was a stark reminder of how little it all seemed to matter to them. This wasn't just about a missed graduation, it was about a pattern, a lifetime of feeling second best, of being overlooked, of having my feelings dismissed. And now, sitting here in this courtroom, years later, facing them across the aisle, I realized that nothing had changed. They were still prioritizing their business, their image, over their own daughter. The pain of that realization was a sharp, stinging blow, as fresh and raw as it had been all those years ago. This time, though, I wouldn't let them dismiss me. This time, I would make them understand. This time, I would have my say. My lawyer, Ms. Klein, squeezed my hand. "Just breathe, Grace. You've got this." I nodded, my throat tight. The courtroom felt colder than it had just moments ago, the air thick with anticipation. My parents, seated across the aisle, looked like they'd seen a ghost. Their carefully constructed facade of indifference had crumbled, replaced by something resembling fear. It was a welcome change. "I'm ready," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the hum of the courtroom's ventilation. The bailiff called for order. Judge Thompson entered, her expression severe. This was it, the moment I'd been working towards, the moment where I finally showed everyone, especially my parents, what their betrayal truly cost me. This wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle, the ultimate betrayal on the happiest day of one's life. "Ms. Miller, you may proceed," Judge Thompson said, her gaze settling on me. I took a deep breath, smoothing down the skirt of my navy blue dress. "Your Honor, I'd like to present a new piece of evidence." My lawyer approached the bench, handing a sealed envelope to the clerk. The clerk passed it to the judge, who opened it with a deliberate slowness that made my heart pound. Inside was a recording of a conversation between my parents and Mr. Henderson, the CEO of the company they'd chosen over my wedding. "Objection." My father's voice boomed across the room. He practically leapt to his feet. His face flushed a deep crimson. "This is entrapment. This recording was obtained illegally." "Your Honor," Ms. Klein said calmly, her voice steady and reassuring. "The recording was made by a third party, a concerned individual who wishes to remain anonymous. The legality of its acquisition is not in question." "That's ridiculous," my mother chimed in, her voice shrill. "This is a blatant attempt to smear our names. We had no idea this conversation was being recorded." Judge Thompson raised a hand, silencing them. "I will determine the admissibility of this evidence. Please be seated, Mr. and Mrs. Miller." They reluctantly sat down, their eyes fixed on the judge as she slipped on a pair of headphones and pressed play. The courtroom was silent, save for the faint hum of the recording device. The conversation played out, clear as day. My parents' voices, filled with excitement, discussing the lucrative deal with Mr. Henderson. They laughed about how easily they had been able to reschedule my wedding, dismissing it as a minor inconvenience. "Grace will understand," my mother had said, her voice dripping with condescension. "She's always been so flexible." The air in the courtroom grew thick with tension. I could feel my parents' glares burning into me, and I refused to look away. This was the truth, raw and ugly, and they couldn't hide from it any longer. A bride's dream wedding turns into a nightmare. As the recording ended, Judge Thompson removed her headphones. She looked at my parents, her expression unreadable. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, she said, her voice low and steady. Do you have any explanation for this? My father cleared his throat. Your Honor, we were simply excited about the business opportunity. We didn't mean for it to sound like we were dismissing Grace's wedding. It was our poor choice of words. Her poor choice of words. Judge Thompson repeated, her voice laced with skepticism. You called your daughter's wedding a minor inconvenience and laughed about rescheduling it. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked at my father, her eyes pleading with him to say something, anything, to salvage the situation. But he just sat there, speechless. Ms. Klein stepped forward. Your Honor, this recording clearly demonstrates the defendant's lack of concern for their daughter's emotional well-being. They prioritized a business deal over their daughter's happiness, causing her significant emotional distress. This is a clear breach of the implied contract between parent and child, a contract based on love, support, and respect. Objection, my father sputtered. There's no such thing as an implied contract between parent and child. Perhaps not in legal terms. Ms. Klein countered smoothly, that the emotional bonds between parent and child are undeniable. The defendant's actions severed those bonds, causing irreparable harm to Ms. Miller. Judge Thompson nodded slowly. I agree. This recording is highly relevant to the case. She turned her attention back to my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I am deeply disappointed in your behavior. Your actions were not only insensitive but also deeply hurtful to your daughter. My father's face crumpled. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of shame and regret. Grace, he began, his voice choked with emotion. I am so sorry. But his apology felt hollow. Too little. Too late, the damage had been done. A bride learns to stand up for herself. The judge continued, her voice firm. We will recess for 15 minutes. I suggest you use this time to reconsider your position, Mr. and Mrs. Miller. As the court emptied, I sat there, stunned. I hadn't expected this. I'd hoped for some acknowledgement of their wrongdoing, some semblance of remorse. But this was more than I could have imagined. The recording had done its job. It had exposed their true colors, revealing the depth of their selfishness. Miss Klein came over and put a hand on my shoulder. You did good, Grace, she said softly. Real good. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. This wasn't just a victory for me. It was a victory for every daughter who'd ever been overlooked, undervalued, and disregarded by her parents. Parents miss their daughter's wedding for a business deal, and sometimes, justice is served. I glanced over at my parents, huddled together, whispering frantically. They looked lost, defeated, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt a flicker of forgiveness. Not yet, but something akin to satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about reclaiming my power, about finally having my voice heard. And it was about showing them, and the world, that I wouldn't be silenced anymore. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom burst overhead, a stark contrast to the opulent chandelier I'd envisioned sparkling above my first dance. The air hung thick with anticipation, the same kind I'd felt hours before walking down the aisle. Except this time, it was tinged with something bitter. Justice, perhaps. All rise, the bailiff barked, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. Judge Thompson entered, her expression as impassive as a marble statue. I gripped Julian's hand, his warmth a small comfort in the icy formality of the proceedings. Be seated, the judge commanded, and the hushed murmurs of the courtroom subsided. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Miller, sat stiffly at their table, their lawyer whispering last-minute instructions. They hadn't even glanced my way since I entered. It was the same vacant stare I'd received when I told them about Julian's proposal, the same indifference that had shadowed my entire life. This is it, Grace, Julian whispered, squeezing my hand. It's almost over. Judge Thompson addressed the court, her voice clear and resonant. In the matter of Grace Miller versus Richard and Eleanor Miller, we are here today for closing arguments. My lawyer, Ms. Carter, a woman whose sharp wit was matched only by her sharper suits, rose to her feet. Your Honor, members of the jury, she began, her voice ringing with conviction. This case is not about a missed wedding. It's about the lifetime of emotional neglect culminating in the ultimate betrayal on the happiest day of one's life. She paced before the jury box, outlining the ways my parents had prioritized their business dealings over my life, culminating in their absence at my wedding. She spoke of the contract they signed, the lucrative deal they couldn't resist, the callous disregard for my feelings. They chose money over their daughter, she stated, her voice heavy with accusation. They chose profit over family. My parents' lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a slick, silver-tongued man, countered with arguments about contractual obligations and the unpredictable nature of business. He tried to paint me as a spoiled brat, a woman throwing a tantrum over a minor inconvenience. He spoke of the sacrifices my parents had made for me, the comfortable life they had provided. They've always provided for Grace, he argued. This lawsuit is frivolous and driven by misplaced emotion. Listening to him twist the narrative, I felt a surge of anger. He was so good at manipulating the truth, at making black look white. It was the same tactic my parents had used my entire life, minimizing my feelings, dismissing my concerns. I looked at Julian, his jaw clenched tight, mirroring my own frustration. It's okay, he murmured. He can't change the facts. Miss Carter delivered a powerful rebuttal, dismantling Mr. Henderson's arguments point by point. She presented evidence of my parents' deliberate choice to attend the business meeting, their complete lack of remorse, and the devastating emotional impact their actions had on me. She reminded the jury of the wedding video, played earlier in the trial, showing the empty seats reserved for my parents, a gaping hole in the joyous celebration. A bride's dream wedding turned into a nightmare, she stated, her voice laced with empathy. Can you imagine the pain, the humiliation, the utter devastation of being abandoned on such a significant day? The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity. Every tick of the clock amplified my anxiety. I replayed the events leading up to this moment, the excitement of planning my wedding, the gut-wrenching realization that my parents wouldn't be there, the painful decision to take legal action. Julian held my hand, his presence a silent anchor in the storm of my emotions. Finally, the jury filed back into the courtroom, their faces inscrutable. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. Judge Thompson addressed the foreman. Has the jury reached a verdict? We have, Your Honor, the foreman replied, handing the sealed envelope to the bailiff. The bailiff passed it to the judge, who opened it with deliberate slowness, her eyes scanning the document. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I held my breath, afraid to even blink. Judge Thompson looked up, her gaze settling on me. In the case of Grace Miller versus Richard and Eleanor Miller, she announced, her voice clear and unwavering, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. My parents stared straight ahead, their faces masks of shock and disbelief. The jury has awarded Grace Miller the sum of $1 in compensatory damages, the judge continued. I blinked, confused. $1. It was a symbolic gesture, a slap in the face to my parents. But then she continued, and the entirety of Richard and Eleanor Miller's joint estate, as outlined in the recently discovered will of their late aunt, Martha Blackwood. My breath caught in my throat. Aunt Martha? I barely remembered her. A distant relative I'd met only a handful of times as a child. She had been wealthy, eccentric, and estranged from my parents for years. I had no idea she'd even considered me in her will. Mr. Henderson sputtered in protest, but Judge Thompson silenced him with a raised hand. The will is valid and legally binding, she stated firmly. It clearly states that Martha Blackwood, deeply disappointed in her niece and nephew's behavior, bequeaths her entire fortune to their daughter, Grace, whom she believed possessed the kindness and integrity they lacked. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. My parents' faces were ashen, their carefully constructed facade crumbling before my eyes. They had lost everything, not just the lawsuit, but their inheritance, their security, their carefully curated image. And it was all because they had chosen a business deal over their daughter's wedding. I looked at Julian, tears streaming down my face. He wrapped his arms around me, his embrace a warm haven in the chaos. This wasn't just about the money, although it certainly felt like a measure of justice. It was about finally being seen, about finally being valued. It was about finally standing up for myself and reclaiming my life. We did it, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You did it, Grace. The ultimate betrayal had led to the ultimate payoff. And in that moment, standing in the hushed courtroom, surrounded by the echoes of my victory, I finally felt free.